dark times had us praying for some brighter days. Wishing well, but I'm really hoping for a change. Yeah.
This is Changemakers. I'm Eric Alvarez here with Ashley Holt as we continue celebrating Women's History Month. Ashley, who are we talking to today?
We're joined by author and activist Raquel Willis. This interview I'm really excited about and I think is extremely important for Women's History Month. Raquel, the reason that this interview came about is going to lead into my first question, because I was coming up with guests and I said I want to make sure that we are inclusive of trans women and their experience in this country when we talk about Women's History Month. And then I thought, how awful that I have to have that thought, right? Because you think about often in white spaces, they're like, yeah, we want to make sure that we're inclusive of, people of color. Is it, do you think, progress that we're starting to ask ourselves these questions, or is it long overdue, and do we need to start having more detailed, better conversations about including trans women in conversations about women?
From my vantage point, I think it's long overdue. I think that in our society, most people know that there are trans people, or that at the very least there are people who don't conform to gender in the same ways as everyone else. I think that at its core, people understand. I think what's difficult now for a lot of people is that they don't have the luxury of pretending like we don't exist, pretending like we're not valid in our experiences, and pretending like our voices don't matter. This age of visibility, which is new, is something that is pushing people to think a little bit deeper on these topics.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that you're seeing as much backlash about it now? Today, like as you said, the age in which social media, it cannot be ignored anymore. But have you noticed that it's making people somehow more against it, or maybe they're just talking about it more and a lot of us didn't realize how bad it was?
In previous generations of trans folks, and when I think about my elders, there was a long gap between them kind of having an understanding of their difference and having access to education about it. Right. But now people get to understand themselves maybe a bit sooner in general. That's why we see so much more discussion around trans youth, right? It's because it's not necessarily that people have been indoctrinated in a way, right? That there's some kind of master trans agenda to infiltrate the minds of future generations. People have more access than ever before to understanding themselves sooner. I grew up in Georgia, very isolated from LGBTQ plus community in Augusta, Georgia in particular. And I probably would have known myself sooner had I had access to information outside of kind of the traditional Southern Black and also Catholic bubble that my parents raised me in.
Yeah. So as you're saying that, I'm thinking about the recent speech that Gabrielle Union and her husband Dwayne Wade made at the NAACP Image Awards. They won an award for their activism and really just loving their daughter, Zaya Wade, who came out recently and said she identified as trans.
Zaya, as your father, all I've wanted to do was get it right. I've sat back and watched how gracefully you've taken on the public scrutiny. And even though it's not easy, I watched you walk out of that house every morning as yourself.
And it gave me chills. And that speech didn't even necessarily, mean anything for me personally, right? It doesn't impact me personally, but I can just, I wonder what that level of acceptance, especially in the Black community, meant for you.
They're not saying that they have all the answers, but all they know is that they love their child.
Yep.
And that they're trying to raise a person who can be the driver of their own destinies. And I think there are so many lessons that people, even if they aren't trans, can learn from that. So I want to push back a little bit, because I know you said it doesn't really have as much to do with you. It actually has everything to do with you. Because when I think about the fact that gender is something that is used to restrict all of us, not just trans people, I think we're just obviously maybe a more drastic experience to a lot of people, but we're all experiencing gender. I can know a cis woman and count the number of times we've had discussions about what it meant to be discounted as a woman, to be told you aren't in control of your own life, your own body, your own destiny and power. And then I think about the cis men that I know, right? The ones who are told that they can't experience certain emotions. They can't cry. They can't express a full range of what it means to be human. That is the way that gender is restricting us. And I think cis people in general can learn a lot from trans folks around what it means to push up against these restrictions that don't serve us.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for that lesson, because I think Black women specifically, and women, we don't ever want to feel like we're taking someone else's moment, right? Like, I don't ever want to sit here and say, oh, that felt so warm and fuzzy for me personally when when it wasn't meant for me. So thank you for that moment, and almost for that permission to be able to share in this movement and what it's teaching people. Go ahead.
Yeah. Ashley, I wanted to talk to you for a second, because here at LX we try to do things a certain way, responsible, but Raquel mentioned authenticity and vulnerability, and just that made me want to tell you, like, a lot of times I try to do exactly that, and I'm not always sure what the best way is to go about it. But I think it's absolutely, I'm just trying to be like very vulnerable and honest here. Like, I really try to, say the right things and offer all this representation, but it's not always easy. Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever go through that?
Of course. And you can only do it as much as you understand, right? Like, it's so important to me to have Raquel here, but I'm also nervous because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I want everyone to understand. I mean, you understand. And I feel crazy sometimes because I feel like so many of like the white people I grew up around who like wanted to compliment my hair, but didn't want to say the wrong thing. Like, that's how I feel. But it's also like, it's about the intent, right? And I feel like people can feel that intent, and hopefully Raquel can feel our intent as well. But I'm hoping that that's where authenticity comes from, that you're just not doing it to check a box.
Right.
And so in that same vein, Raquel, I want to end on this note. What do trans women need from not just other women, but from society, from their friends, from their siblings, whoever, that we wouldn't know that you need it unless we asked you in a way like this? And not in private, me and you at coffee, because then I only learn, I can't, share it. What is something that we would only know if we asked you on a platform like this?
Holding folks accountable when you see and hear things that are wrong. Your friend making that joke about trans people not being who they say they are, that is just like a little pebble that might roll down a mountain of hate, right? And kind of cause an avalanche. You got to nip that stuff in the bud before it gets worse, because if you don't speak up, then you're giving them permission to hate. And hopefully no one wants to be invested in that.
Raquel Willis, I want to thank you so much for coming here, educating the people in the room and the people who watch. This experience has meant a whole lot to us, and I hope it means just as much to everyone who is able to watch it. We appreciate you and your time and your work.